What an entrance there. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Joanne Bautista, and I will be this afternoon's moderator on, is the mic, am I on yet? Okay, sorry about that, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. We are excited to have our distinguished panel here today to talk about voting rights and protecting democracy. I'm joined by former Speaker of the Maine House of Representatives and candidate for governor, Hannah Pingree. And yes. And also the remarkable ranking Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Jamie Raskin. Before we begin, a couple, housekeeping items. Just want to remind everyone to silence your cell phones at this time and refrain from flash photography during the event. So, who am I? Why am I up here? I am an associate director with the Bipartisan Policy Center on their elections project, which is part of the larger democracy team. Although I want to make clear that I'm not here on behalf of the Bipartisan Policy Center, I'm here in my personal capacity. And up until the end of last year, I was Deputy Secretary of State Policy Advisor for the Maine Department of the Secretary of State. So I love talking about elections and all things democracy. So as you all know, we are going to have a very interesting and very timely conversation about the challenges and opportunities facing our democratic institution, especially even more so as we look ahead to a ballot referendum happening in about a month, to a pivotal election in 2026. This November, question 1, which we'll talk about a little bit further in our discussion, would make voting harder for many Mainers. It imposes voter ID requirements, restricts absentee voting, and removes options that seniors, people with disabilities, and rural voters rely on. That's why forums like this matter. It's important for people to understand the real impact of policies like question 1 before they vote. From voter access and election integrity to the role of civic education and combating disinformation, these issues are not just policy debates. They're fundamental to the health and future of our democracy. So throughout today's forum, we'll explore how lawmakers, elected officials, and regular citizens like all of you can all work together to safeguard the right to vote and ensure fair and transparent elections. We'll also hear directly from our distinguished guests about the legislative and grassroots efforts currently underway to strengthen democratic participation. So to start, I want to first hand it over to my friend, Hannah Pingree. Hannah's a former Speaker of the House, as I said, and also a Democratic candidate for the governor of Maine. Most recently, she directed Governor Janet Mills's Office of Policy Innovation and the Future, where she led statewide work on climate action, housing, and Maine's most pressing issues. A native of North Haven, Pingree, where I learned she still lives, which is fascinating. Pingree still lives on the island with her husband and her 2 children and is deeply committed to building a stronger, more sustainable future for Maine families and communities. So Hannah, I want to turn it over to you. If that's okay to call you Hannah, I can call you former Speaker, whatever makes the most sense. Tell us a little bit about why you're here and a little bit about yourself.
Great, well, thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right, good. Joanne is such a rock star. What she is doing, fighting for our democracy, our voting rights now around the country, it's such an honor to have you here, and thank you for the work that you do here. There are so many other people in this room who are similar rock stars. I'm sure everyone is here because you care about the future of our democracy. But I want to just point out, my Congresswoman Shelley Pingree is here. I just want to ask. I'm a little biased, but I am a fan, and I am so appreciative of the work that she and Congressman Raskin are doing to really stand on the front lines of so many fights right now. I also want to thank Portland's mayor, Mayor Mark Dion, who is such a great leader for this city. And I have so many friends from the legislature who are here, and I can't, if I start naming them all, I see them in the front row. If you are a state representative, a state senator, or you're serving in any elected office, planning board, city council, select board, will you stand up and just be recognized? I think we're going to be talking about this a lot today, but I will just say the stakes for serving in public office have never been more important or more challenging. I first ran for office when I was 25 years old. I started knocking on doors in Stonington, running to be a state representative, and I've now been in office for almost 25 years. I spent 8 years in the legislature, I served on my school board, and I've spent the last 6.5 years working for Governor Mills. And I will just say, it is not an easy time to be in public office. It's a dangerous time. It's a time in which putting yourself out there puts you at risk. Serving on a school board, we're seeing battles that we never thought were possible. So I will just say it is such an important time for people to be engaged in public life, to be engaged in their community, to step up for their neighbors, but it has never been a more difficult time. It is such an important time for good people to step up and run for office. And I think everybody in this room understands that. The issues at stake in our communities, in our state and our democracy have never been more significant. I think as you know, in this room, I am running for governor. And I will just say that when I thought about running for governor, I sort of thought about the issues that we wanted to solve, the things that we wanted to do for the state of Maine. And in the time I've thought about it, and then when I've launched my campaign, I now see that governors have never been more important for our democracy. Governors are on the front line of so many fights. I mean, you see it on the nightly news, but even here in the state of Maine. I mean, Governor Mills, she said to President Trump, "I'll see you in court." We're proud of the fight that she's taken on, but she's had to do things that we didn't think governors in Maine would have to do. She had to issue a standing order for COVID vaccines for everybody in the state of Maine because we were being let down by the US CDC. Governors are going to have to step up because the Federal Department of Education has gotten rid of the Civil Rights Division that help protect children in our schools. Governors are going to have to step up and lead. Governors are going to have to step up on a woman's right to choose, on LGBT rights, on immigrants' rights, on so many things that we know are important and did not used to be the responsibility of states and governors. President Trump has even talked about getting rid of FEMA. And I think we can all imagine what a storm recovery might look like without FEMA. So the challenges right now for governors, the bravery of governors around the country who are stepping up and fighting back, it's significant. And it's a really important time for all of us to think about how do we elect leaders who are ready and willing to stand up for the people of Maine. So I think Joanne mentioned that I'm from a tiny community, an island called North Haven, and you've probably heard my mom talk about it. It's a community of 400 people, and it's a community in which, on an issue like voting, I mean, I know my town clerk. I know the Republicans and the Democrats who are going to count our ballots this November. It's a community where people have to step up and be engaged with their neighbors. I think almost every member of my family has served on the school board at some point. My mother at one point drove the ambulance. I'm not really sure how they let her do that. My dad was an EMT. Members of my family serve as EMTs, as firefighters. They step up and get engaged. And we're not unique in my family. Everybody in my community needs to step up and be involved. And when you live on an offshore island, you are really kind of out there on your own. Nobody is coming to your rescue. You have to be there for each other. And that's when I think about our democracy, when I think about the issues our state is facing and even our country is facing, we're kind of in the same scenario. No one is going to save us but ourselves. And that is honestly, that's kind of the ethic that has driven me to step up and run for office. That's what continues to drive me. This feeling that caring for our neighbors and fixing challenges, it is up to us. And right now in our democracy, the issues have never been greater. The state of Maine is facing challenges on the issues like healthcare, where our fundamental right to have access is challenged. We're seeing a huge fight in Washington, which I am so proud of those on the stage in the audience who are helping to fight. And we know we're in a housing crisis. We have a climate crisis. We have challenges of how do we ensure good schools and good paying jobs, and we lower costs. So the issues for our families and for our state have never been more important. But we're here today to talk about democracy and voting. And voting is really the sort of fundamental cornerstone of our democracy. And right now, I think as you know, this kind of national fight to take away the rights of voters, it has sadly come to the state of Maine with question 1. And hopefully you all know the kind of basic details. But question 1, most significantly, makes absentee voting much, much more difficult. So we know who put this on the ballot. They are folks who want to make it harder for people to vote. And in Maine, absentee voting is kind of a way of life. We've got lots of older people in their homes, disabled folks, rural folks, people who work long, long hours and can't always get to the polls. So making absentee voting much, much more difficult makes participation in our democracy more difficult for thousands of Maine people. Question 1 does a lot of other stupid things that you've probably heard about. One of the things it does, it says in every town you can only have one box in which you put your ballot, your absentee ballots. In the city of Portland, only one box. That makes absolutely no sense. So we all know that we have to fight hard for our democracy in so many places and locations, but right now this fight is here and in front of us. So we'll talk about it a little bit more at the end, but I will just say the next coming weeks and days are important. This weekend, I'm leading a canvass, as are lots of others. I'm going to be in Booth Bay helping people knock on doors. They're knocking on doors on Saturday and Sunday, so if you're not yet engaged, please sign up on the way out the door. And if you're busy this weekend, think about, 1, making a plan to vote, 2, telling your friends and your neighbors and your kids and everyone else that this is one of the first places where we have a chance to make a stand in this big fight that we've had over the last couple of months. So please think about how you can get involved. So again, I'm very excited to talk about all the issues that are at stake, to talk about question 1, and I think maybe even a little bit about why we still need to be hopeful about the future of our democracy. But I get to introduce my good friend, Congressman Jamie Raskin, who is, again, such a... I should have asked him some secret things that you don't know, so I'm probably going to tell you a few things that you do know. Congressman Raskin is in his 5th term representing Maryland's 8th district in the U.S. House. He's the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, and if you've ever seen him in action, you know he brings both brilliance and moral clarity to the work of defending the Constitution. Yeah. You probably remember him as the lead impeachment manager during the 2nd impeachment trial of President Trump. And he's got a lot of applause lines. And for his powerful service on the January 6th committee, where he helped the country make sense of one of the most dangerous moments of our democracy. And this is a guy who's been showing up for a long time, so you may or may not know, but before Congress, he spent years as a state senator in Maryland. He taught constitutional law at American University, so he actually knows what he's talking about when it comes to the Constitution, unlike a lot of other folks these days. So I'm going to pass it off to Congressman Raskin. He's going to tell us why he's here in Maine today and why this is such an important time for our country.
All right.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Hannah Pingree. And hello to Maine. Hello to Portland. Hello, Shelley Pingree. Hello, Mr. Mayor. Hello, Joanne. And thank you all for having me. Thank you for this beautiful weather here in Maine. It's gorgeous. It was really hot when we were down in the capital city yesterday and the day before, although I like to say down there, it's not the heat, it's the stupidity. And we got plenty of that to go around. But thank you for inviting me to your beautiful state. Why am I here? I'm here to say no on one and yes on Hannah Pingree. And I can never resist the invitation to come to your beautiful state to talk about democracy. So just to cut me off as soon as if I start rhapsodizing too much. But I am here, like maybe a lot of people in the room, as a true blue, dyed-in-the-wool, die-hard Democrat. Okay, but I know that the question of democracy and constitutional freedom, these are questions that go way beyond one political party. They're for everybody. So I thought I would start my little brief remarks, Hannah, on a bipartisan note by invoking our last great Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, who spoke of government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And this is the beautiful, tantalizing ideal, the motor force of American history. And yet we didn't start that way. We started as a slave republic of white male property owners over the age of 21. But it's been through successive waves of political and social struggle and constitutional enlargement that we've opened America up. We've become a more perfect union, something much closer to Lincoln's beautiful, tantalizing ideal. And if you read the Constitution the way that I do, the vast majority of the amendments that we've passed since the original Bill of Rights, there have only been 17 of them, and the vast majority of them are democratizing amendments. That's been the whole meaning and purpose of them. This is what I try to tell the kids when I get to talk to the kids in school, right? The 13th Amendment abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except in prison. That's a different story. The 14th Amendment gave us equal protection and due process. The 15th Amendment banned race discrimination in voting. The 17th Amendment shifted the mode of election of the U.S. senators from the state legislatures to the people. The 19th Amendment doubled the franchise in America by giving women the right to vote in women's suffrage. The 23rd Amendment gave people in Washington, D.C. the right to participate in presidential elections, at least. The 24th Amendment banned poll taxes in our elections, and the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age to 18. The entire trajectory and movement of our history has been towards greater democracy, greater inclusion, and strengthening of the power of the people over our own government. That's really been the meaning. And sometimes, our colleagues across the aisle, they'll get up and say, you keep talking about democracy. We're not a democracy, we're a republic. And I say, well, first of all, a republic is just a representative democracy. That's what a republic is, because we can't fit 300 million people into even the University of Southern Maine's auditorium, right? So we elect representatives, but those of us who are representatives, like all these wonderful people in the first couple rows, all of us, no matter how high we go, whether we're talking about a board select person, we're talking about a U.S. Congresswoman, we're talking about a governor of a state, we're talking about president or vice president of the United States, all of us are nothing but the servants of the people under democracy. And the moment somebody gets into public office and they begin to act like they're a king, they're a queen, they're a monarch, they're an emperor, they're a lord, that is the moment to evict, eject, reject, impeach, try, convict, and start all over again. We don't need it. That's not what democracy is. That's not what democracy is. Here, the highest office in the land is the office of citizen of the United States. That's the highest office we've got, citizen. So, my friends, I don't need to tell you that democracy is under attack, under siege all over the world. It's not just in America that this is happening. All of the tyrants and the despots and the dictators have found each other. The plutocrats who think that the richest people should run everything. The kleptocrats who think that the purpose of government is to allow the guy who gets in to steal everything from everybody else. The theocrats who think the purpose of government is to impose a religious orthodoxy on the people and to conscript religion to the purposes of their power. Right? Well, the autocrats, the theocrats, the kleptocrats, the plutocrats, the dictators, the bullies, they've all gotten together, and we need transnational democratic solidarity all over the world to stand up against the dictators. Here in America, our Constitution's under attack. The separation of powers is under attack. The whole purpose of our government is under attack. The purpose of our Constitution is built right into it. We've got a mission statement, the preamble of the Constitution. They don't teach this to the kids, but they should. Teach the preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and preserve to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of liberty, do hereby ordain and establish the Constitution of the United States. And the very next sentence, the first sentence of Article 1 says, all legislative power is vested in a Congress of the United States. The sovereign power of the people flows right through the preamble and goes to the Congress. It lays out everything. We've got the power to declare war. It's not up to the president. The president can't say, we're at war with Venezuela if we didn't vote for it. It's not up to Donald Trump. It's not up to Tulsi Gabbard or their Signal chat group to declare war. It's up to the representatives of the people, because the framers of the Constitution understood the way that kings were constantly plunging their lands and their people into wars of vanity and conceit and plunder and avarice and greed. They wanted the very difficult problem of war and peace and life and death to be entrusted only to the representatives of the people. So that belongs to Congress. We're the ones who determine how money is spent. If we say we're going to spend money on the Department of Education or the Agency for International Development or the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and you're the president and you don't like that, you spend that money. Your job is to enforce the will of the people. We've got the power to impose taxes and tariffs. No president in our history up until this one has ever dared to unilaterally impose tariffs and start trade wars against other countries without Congress doing it. We've got the power to regulate commerce among the states and with foreign nations. We've got the power to impose taxes and tariffs, which is why the Court of International Trade has struck down those tariffs, and Trump appealed it to the Federal Circuit Court in D.C., and they also struck it down. So right now, you know, there have been more than 400 cases brought against this reign of lawlessness, and we have won more than 90% of the time in federal district courts, and overwhelmingly in the appeals court. You know, and you get to the end of it, you know, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, and all other powers necessary and proper to the execution of the foregoing powers, right? Because we're the ones to govern. So then you get to Article 2, which is like this big. The major paragraph says, a president shall be removed from office upon impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors, right? Sometimes my colleagues will get up, including my beloved Nancy Pelosi, and they'll say, we're three co-equal branches. And I always get up immediately, and I beg to differ with them. Why? Well, first of all, co-equal is not even a word, okay? That's the first problem. And secondly, if we're co-equal, why do we have the power to impeach, try, convict, remove, and disqualify from office the president, and he doesn't have the power to impeach, try, convict, disqualify, and remove us, right? It doesn't make any sense if we're equal. We had a revolution against mad kings. One guy who would get into office and then bring the whole country to plunder and ruin. So that's not the design of our Constitution. We have a Bill of Rights to protect the rights of the people. the freedom of speech. No, we don't have a king who gets to decide who has the right to do comedy and who doesn't have the right to do comedy, right? That's not how it works. And that was a big win for us, a huge victory. Some people say, well, it's not that big a deal. It was just a comedian. Just a comedian. I mean, there are tens of millions of people who are maintaining their hope and their sanity because of the late night comedians, right? And the comedians are important because they show that we don't have to be afraid. Under our First Amendment, you can make fun of the king. You can make fun of a president, as they knew, of course, when Joe Biden was president or Barack Obama was president and Donald Trump was running around saying he's not even a U.S. citizen, he wasn't born here. You can say whatever you want about the president without going to jail or getting thrown off of your TV station. This is the United States of America. We've got the First Amendment here. We've got the freedom of speech, and we got the freedom of press, right? They take the Associated Press and they kick them out of the White House because they insisted on calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Mexico. Right? You've got a right to tell the truth under the First Amendment. Not just a right to lie, you've got a right to tell the truth. And the separation of church and state is under attack everywhere. One of our colleagues got up on the floor not long ago and said, the moral downfall of America was in 1962 in Engel versus Vitale when the Supreme Court banned prayer in the public schools. So I got up and I said, you know what? The Supreme Court never banned prayer in the public schools. As long as there are pop math quizzes, there will be prayer in the public schools, okay? Anybody can pray whenever he or she wants to pray. It's just the government cannot write a script and compel your children to participate in it. But it doesn't end with these people, right? Louisiana and Texas voted to endorse the Ten Commandments and post the Ten Commandments all over the place. I knew it was going to happen. Our MAGA colleagues show up and they say, we need to endorse the Ten Commandments. We need to post the commandments. I'm like, gee, you know, the Ten Commandments have been doing fine for millennia without an endorsement by the U.S. House of Representatives and the Freedom Caucus. No, one guy says to me, he says, the Ten Commandments are the basis for the Bill of Rights. You know, I was kind of confused. I was like, well, I know there are 10 in each one and everything, but then I said, look, let's test the proposition. The First Commandment says, thou shalt have no other God before me. The First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. How does the First Commandment dictate the First Amendment? But we go up to the Rules Committee, our friend Jim McGovern. They want to say, we want an up or down vote on the Ten Commandments on the House floor. And I said, you know what? If we're going to vote on the Ten Commandments in 2025, we should have to vote on each commandment separately, okay? And not the omnibus package that they want. And you can't vote for any commandment you yourself have ever violated. So anyway, this is the whole Bill of Rights is under attack. The right to vote is clearly under attack everywhere with the voter suppression tactics, with the extreme new gerrymandering that they're trying to impose on us, not just every decade, but every 2 years, they want to use the computers and artificial intelligence in order to redesign congressional districts to squeeze 5 more districts out of Texas or Missouri or Kansas or Ohio or Florida, wherever they control. The legislatures, they want to completely drain the meaning out of voting, so it's all set up in advance. The politicians will choose the voters before the voters choose the politicians. So the election is a pure formality. We're just walking through the steps. Due process under attack, the 2 most beautiful words in the U.S. Constitution, which separate our rights and our freedoms from the arbitrary power of the state. One of our colleagues said to me, wait, you don't support due process for guilty people, do you? Okay. And I'm like, well, that's the whole point, right? That's why we've got due process. So anyway, we're in the fight of our lives. We're in the fight of our lives, and we get to wake up every day and to fight for everything we believe in and everything that our forefathers and foremothers fought for in America to defend it. You know, sometimes people say to me, like, I had a colleague Trey Gowdy from South Carolina, who left Congress, and I went to his goodbye thing, and then on the way out, he said, Raskin, you're not a bad guy, but the problem with you is you're a liberal. And I said, you're damn right. I'm a liberal because the heart of that word is liberty. And I'm a progressive because the heart of that word is progress. But the thing I love to call myself the most today is a conservative because I want to conserve the land, the air, the water, the climate system, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, democracy, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the National Labor Relations Act, the Fair Labor Standards Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the ACA, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, everything that their party of nihilists and authoritarians wants to destroy. It's everything that we're going to conserve in America. So at this point, Anna, we are the party that is defending everything. Yeah. Everything that we've built and everything that we can move forward to. Sometimes when people say we're defending democracy, that feels a little abstract to me because democracy is not just a collection of rules and rights. Democracy is a project. It's always unfolding. It's an unfinished draft always, right? And John Dewey said that the only solution to the ills of democracy is more democracy. And what we're suffering from today is not democracy, but all the obstacles and the impediments to it. The voter suppression tactics, the attempt to stop people from voting by absentee ballot, the extreme gerrymandering of our districts, Citizens United, right-wing judicial activism. All of these are attempts to interfere with the overwhelming majority of the people who stand with progress and who stand with democracy, right? We're together on that. So we've got to keep democracy moving forward and not lapse into something else like plutocracy or autocracy. We've got to keep moving forward. That's why I talk a lot about statehood, and I'm not talking about Greenland and Canada and Panama. I'm talking about Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, okay? And we voted for statehood in 2 or 3 Congresses ago. We voted for statehood for Washington, D.C., and I got to be the floor leader, and I stood up and I said, I want to thank 713,000 tax-paying draftable American citizens who have an authentic, bona fide grievance against the United States Congress, but didn't come down here and beat the daylights out of our police officers and storm the Capitol and try to shut down the government of the United States. They did it the right way. They petitioned for statehood after having a constitutional convention. We should grant that petition and give them their political equality. So, anyway, I will leave you. I don't want to leave without invoking my favorite Tom Paine, if that's all right.
Please.
And I hope you're not leaving. We still have questions to go through.
All right. Yeah. Oh, we're doing the Q&A. Right. Okay. Well, anyway, Paine, who my son Tommy was named after, he got here in 1774, 2 years before the American Revolution. He fell in love with the promise of America. He said, if this land lives up to its ideals and its principles, it will become an asylum to humanity, he said. Not an insane asylum, mind you. An asylum to humanity, a place of refuge for people seeking freedom from religious and political and intellectual repression all over the world. And he wrote the great pamphlet of our history, Common Sense, by which he meant we have the 5 senses that we're born with if we're lucky, and then a 6th sense, a common sense, the sense we have in common when we're willing to reason together, speak and listen to each other without dogma and superstition, what we would call today propaganda and fake news. And so anyway, that pamphlet ignited the American Revolution, and Washington had the troops reading it at Valley Forge by campfire light. But 1776, that was a tough year, and the country, we like to think it was all unified, everybody was in the revolution, but not at all. I'm reading an interesting book about that right now by H.W. Brands that's called The First Civil War, and it was about how the revolution really split the country down the middle, and nobody knew which way it was going to go. Were people going to go with the autocrats and the authoritarians and all the unreason and irrationality, or were people going to go with the Enlightenment and democracy? But half of the people are running around saying, you can't beat the greatest military empire that ever existed. You can't beat the kings. You can't beat the autocrats. People have always lived under people like King George or Vladimir Putin or Donald Trump. That's been the fate of humanity. They said, you can't do it. And half of the people were saying, well, let's give it a try, right? Let's see if we can put government on the principle of the consent of the governed, the equality of the people, the defense of the unalienable rights of everybody to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Let's pledge to each other our fortunes, our lives, our sacred honor to make it happen. Anyway, Paine wanted to write a pamphlet in 1776 to get people over the top, to say we need one last huge push from everybody to make this happen. And he wrote this beautiful pamphlet called The American Crisis. So I just want to quote a little passage for you. And pursuant to strict instructions from Nancy Pelosi, I'm going to update the language so it doesn't offend modern sensibilities. And Paine was a feminist, that he was. He was fighting for women's voting rights in the 18th century. But anyway, he said, these are the times that try men and women's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will shrink at this moment from the service of their cause and their country. But everyone that stands with us now will win the love and the favor and the affection of every man and every woman for all time. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but we have this saving consolation. The more difficult the struggle, the more glorious in the end will be our victory. Let's make that victory ours. Woo-hoo! Thank you.
Woo! Thank you. That was amazing.
Thank you, everybody.
Wow. That was better than any intro that I think I could have given. I feel like I can run through a brick wall for the Constitution right now. Thank you so much for setting the stage in terms of what we're facing right now and the state of democracy. And so, Hannah, I want to start with you. Maine has been at the center of a number of high-profile scuffles with the Trump administration and the federal government. Can you tell us a little bit about how these fights, like redistricting and cutting off federal funding to Maine and threatening of voting rights, how they're playing out here in the state?
Yeah, great question. Well, thank you again, Jamie. That's very inspiring. It's terrible to follow you. I don't know whose idea it was for me to be sitting on the stage with this guy, but we all needed that, so thank you. Yeah. I will say, we're in the fight of our lives, as Jamie said, but the good news is, in many ways, the courts have been good in terms of helping us stand up for our state. So many of you know Governor Mills had this sort of high-profile moment with President Trump, and he picked a fight with her, and she said she would see him in court, and then the sort of pain and suffering of how can I torture Maine started. And he tried to cut off funds for all kinds of good things, from the University of Maine and our Sea Grant program to kids' food programs, and on and on and on. And I will say, I don't think he's here today, but Attorney General Fry has done a fantastic job helping to lead our state and working with other attorney generals to fight back on so many fronts. And we have won case after case after case. Obviously, I'm sure that Congressman Raskin knows this well. We have started to lose some fights. I mean, just recently, we have started to lose a fight about reproductive rights and how we fund Planned Parenthood and family planning in our state. So I will say the president has tried to focus on Maine and trying to cut off a lot of the good work that we do through federal funding, but we have, through our delegation and through the courts, fought back, and we have won on many turns. The redistricting fight that's playing out nationally, I would say, is unlikely to come to Maine. So I'm sure, Joanne, you're an expert on these things, but Maine's redistricting requires a 2/3 vote of the legislature. So we're not likely to see any. We have a Democratic legislature. We need to hold on to that. But we're not likely to see that kind of fight play out. But really, one of the reasons we're here today is about voting rights. And the Democrats hold the majority in the legislature, and they have done a very good job standing up for the rights of citizens and voting rights and our ability to participate in our democracy. But we have, as many people know, a citizen initiative process here in Maine, and that's why we're voting on question 1. So they got the signatures to do a number of things to roll back voting rights. So that is really, I think, where we are most at risk right now as a state. It is about question 1 and our ability to continue to participate in our democracy and have people show up to vote. So we've won some fights. We're starting to lose some fights due to the U.S. Supreme Court. But generally, we are standing up at every turn. And the legislature and the attorney general and the governor have continued to stand strong. And obviously, you've probably read in the news, Governor Mills is working more and more with other governors around the country, even finding ways to work with our friends in Canada about how do we fight back? How do we solve problems in ways with our neighbors during a time in which the federal government is really stepping away from many of their responsibilities?
Yeah, and so this has been stated a number of times that states have been rolling back voting access over the last couple of years, similar to what the intent behind question 1 is. At the same time, we're seeing the Voting Rights Act significantly weakened by Supreme Court decisions. So, yeah. Congressman Raskin, what would restoring the VRA look like? Does Congress have the political will, and what can be done?
Well, there's no political will with Speaker Mike Johnson in control of the House of Representatives and the Republicans controlling the Senate. The problem is they dismantled Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act in Shelby County versus Holder in 2013. That was the pre-clearance requirement that before a so-called covered jurisdiction that had a history of voting discrimination made changes, they had to go to court and do it. Well, they got rid of that, essentially, saying that it was out of date and the pre-coverage formula was obsolete. Now they're going after Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which is all that's really left of it. And the purpose of their going after that in this Louisiana case is basically to try to dismantle any districts that are majority African-American districts. The Supreme Court already did that in Shaw versus Reno and Miller versus Johnson, which were cases where the Supreme Court said that you can't have a bizarrely configured majority black or Hispanic district, but you can have a bizarrely configured majority white district, okay, which sounds like an equal protection violation in itself, that this is their rule. But now they are targeting a lot of majority black districts, and that's happened since the Texas chainsaw gerrymander massacre took place, where they tried to take 5 Democratic districts and dismantled them. They went right to Missouri to come after our colleague, Congressman Cleaver. They dismembered his district. Now they're going to Kansas to go after Sharice David's district. They're calling entire special legislative sessions to excise one district, one for a majority African-American district in Missouri, and now in Kansas, our colleague Sharice David, I think, is certainly the first Democratic woman and the first Native American to represent a district there, and they want to slice and dice her up pizza style into a whole bunch of other districts to make it impossible for her to come back. She's the only Democrat from the entire Kansas delegation. So then they're going to Ohio, then they're going to Florida. So, this is what we're up against. And I like the way that Hannah put it when she said, most of the courts have been on our side. That's right. It's only one court we have a problem with, but it is the Roberts Court, and it's a thoroughly illegitimate court. I don't want to take you off on a law review article excursion, but I've written about this, and let me tell you about my constituent, Merrick Garland, the former Attorney General. But before he was that, he was the Chief Judge of the D.C. Circuit, and President Obama nominated him in February of 2016 to the Supreme Court. It was 11 months before the election. And Mitch McConnell said, that's too close to the election. We're going to allow the people to decide. Well, of course, Barack Obama had been elected to one of those bona fide 4-year presidential terms, and he was nominating a Supreme Court justice because there was a vacancy in the court, but McConnell said, no, it's way too close. Then they filled that one, and then 4 years later, in October of 2020, when the late sainted Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, just 2 months before the election, the press said to Mitch McConnell, well, you're not going to have hearings on this and try to vote on this in the next 2 months after your 11-month rule. And he said, well, of course we are. That was just for the Democrats. And then they railroaded through Amy Coney Barrett, Mrs. Waterford, and put her in. But I mean, that's just one example. I mean, you can go seat by seat and you can look at the ethics crisis on the Supreme Court and so on.
Yep.
So we have a real problem there. But the rule of law is holding at the district court level. It's holding at the appeals court level among judges that were nominated by both Democrats and by Republicans. But we have a very serious legitimacy crisis in the Roberts Court. And so people need to be paying attention and talking about the Constitution. Constitution does not belong to the Supreme Court. It's emphatically the province and the duty of the court to say what the law is, Marbury versus Madison, but it's not their Constitution. It's the people's Constitution, and ultimately, we've got to safeguard it, and we've got to make sure that the Constitution is being respected and enforced and perpetuated in the country.
Yep. Yep. And so, Hannah, how about for you? What do you think, what's the place of governors when voting access is being restricted? What can governors do to ensure that communities like the elderly, people who live in rural communities, communities of color, still have access to the ballot box?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the good news is that states still control elections, right? This is still gonna happen. I mean, I will say, as I travel the state and talk to people, people are really worried about the upcoming election and the kinds of threats that President Trump has made. And they've asked me, are you sure that we're gonna have an election? And I mean, honestly, I think we all have to have faith and confidence. Elections are gonna continue to happen. We all have to ensure they continue to happen. And they are under the jurisdictions of states and governors and secretary of states and legislatures. And obviously, we are fighting back right now in question 1 to ensure that voting is still easy and accessible. But no matter what, this is up to the power of the governor and legislature to make decisions about how elections are conducted. And we've fought really hard. I mean, we've made so many, I'm sure Joanne has more ideas for us, but we've done so many things to make voting more easy and accessible. And again, that's what's at stake this election. But God forbid it passes, it could be up to the legislature to decide how to pull some of these things back. So the leadership of the state at the state level is essential. And I will say that's one of the reasons why this election is important, whose governor is important, but also who is the legislature is important. The legislature in Maine elects our Secretary of State. And that is how we manage our elections. We have nonpartisan election officials all across the state, and they do a really good job maintaining our voting system. So the leadership of the governor, again, working with all of those in the state house and at the local level, that's how elections happen. In terms of ensuring that we're getting people engaged, I mean, there still are challenges. We're a huge rural state where we have transportation challenges. It's hard to get out. It is, you know, a lot of people are lacking access still to the internet. So how we help connect people, how we help connect them through transportation and education about voting and what's coming up, I mean, that's sort of the province of both the leadership of the governor, but a lot of us in this room about how we communicate. I will just say we are facing, I would say, somewhat a crisis of young people and how they feel about democracy, and we might talk more about that. But I do think it's kind of the role of all of us, especially to think about how we engage our kids, how we engage them in civic education, how we talk to people on university campuses, because kids are feeling pretty bummed out about the world right now. And why should I vote? And can I really make a difference? So ensuring voting rights is essential, but how we engage people to understand how important voting is, especially young people who are just turning 17 or 18 or who are in college, about what this will mean for the future of their lives. I mean, I think that's something that governors need to step up and be engaged in a big way and figure out, how do we provide hope that participating will make a difference. So that's a long answer, but lots that can be done by those who are in charge.
Yeah, and talking about young people and, the Gen Z generation, is there anything that gives you hope about the next generation of civic leaders, and like how can you, as governor,
Sure.
potential governor,
Yeah.
effectively engage with that group of voters?
Well, I mean, I will say Jamie's here, and he has helped lead this program called Democracy Summer to get lots more young people involved in elections. So thank you for that program and that idea and the young people. Who engage. So part of my job over the last 6.5 years has been to be involved in a lot of issues that are important to our whole state, but we've had a lot of young people involved. So the issue of climate action and how we take a stand on both doing our part globally to fight climate change, but also how we help prepare our communities for the climate impacts we are already seeing. I mean, this is an issue from like day one being involved in the governor's administration. Young people showed up and said, we want something to happen. We want you to do something big. We're gonna hold you accountable. So I think young people are paying huge attention. I mean, the issue of housing is another one that I hear about from people of all ages, all over the state. But young people are very, very engaged on the issue of housing and how can they afford a home someday in the community that they grew up in? How can they afford a rent in Portland or any of the communities across Maine? So I think young people, I've seen, they are articulate, they are smart, and they want something genuine to happen. They want real, exciting solutions and proposals, and they're paying attention. They are, I will say, pretty disappointed about the state of the world. They feel let down by where we are, and I think a lot of what's happening in Washington makes that harder. But from every conversation I've had, we have so many smart, young, engaged people in our state, in our middle schools, in our high schools, in our colleges and universities, and they're paying attention. They are engaging me and asking me hard questions, as well as the other people I'm running against, and they really want to see a brighter future. And there's a lot of challenges right now, but they are asking hard questions, and they make me hopeful because they're paying attention and they deeply care about the future of our state.
And Congressman Raskin, can you tell us a little bit about Democracy Summer for people who might be unfamiliar with the organization? What's the goal behind it? What's your hope that?
Well, I appreciate that, and Hannah, thank you for mentioning it. And Shelley's been one of my partners in it. But I started it actually when I first ran for public office. I was running for the state senate back in 2006, and I was trying to figure out a way to get our 3 kids, and I have like a dozen nieces or nephews involved in the campaign, and I was trying to round them up, and it was difficult. And then one of my nieces, Maggie, said, well, what are we going to do? Put on our resume that we worked for our uncle's losing state senate campaign? And I said, first of all, we're not going to lose, and secondly, you're not just working for my campaign, you're part of Democracy Summer. And I was just making it up as I went along, and he said, what's that? I said, well, we're going to get like the greatest voting rights lawyers and political philosophers and historians and elected officials and campaign managers to come in and to teach you about politics. And then and that's in the morning, and you'll go out in the afternoon and you'll knock on doors and you'll canvass and register voters and do it. And this last summer, we had more than 1,000 kids across the country in 42
That's
states.
amazing.
So I think we have around 5,000 alumni around the country, and they're quite a force. But as Hannah Pingree says, it's a very tough time for young people, and they're freaked out about the overarching crisis of our time, which we haven't even mentioned yet, which is climate change and gun violence, and the fact that RFK Jr. is in charge of our public health. And I mean, we're going to end up with the bubonic plague before this administration's over. All of those things. And so we say to them, look, politics is not going to be like a panacea for everything that is on your mind, and there's a lot on their minds, but it's going to help. It's going to be part of the solution. And we need to open that space for them to come in, and we got to listen to them. And I went out a couple months ago and I endorsed Mamdani for mayor But you know, I mean, I don't think I would have done it as early as I had done it had it not been for Democracy Summer and my being able to see what their reaction was to his campaign and talking about the price of housing and the price of transportation and you know, the price of groceries and how difficult it is to live in, you know, not just the most expensive city in the country, but anywhere. And so he's resonated with them. And, you know, it's not just that we're going to help teach them what we know, but we're going to learn from them too. Yep. And yep. So thank you for mentioning Democracy Summer. And anybody, if you've got kids or grandkids who want to be involved, have them check it out with Shelley, with Jared, and you know, we're hoping to be in every congressional district in America in 2026.
Awesome. Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's shift a little bit and talk about an issue that's kind of been on the rise since the 2016 election, misinformation. We are now living in an age where information gets around faster than ever. But along with that, we have seen growing concerns for disinformation and foreign interference. So Hannah, what role do you think the states play in doing more to protect the democratic process, from voting to getting people basic information about their government, you know, what their leaders are doing?
It's a great question. I'm excited to hear what Congressman Raskin thinks on this one as well. But I would just say, when I was in the legislature, when I was speaker, we started to have comment sections under Bangor Daily News stories. And that was sort of the worst case scenario. It's like, oh God, what do they say? Don't read the comments. And now we're living, you know, many years later in an era in which we are all kind of living in our own algorithm, or we are watching our own news station. And it is, I mean, we're living in this era of very different news content, very different facts. So that was already a challenge. And it's a challenge for all of us in our democracy and how we find common ground. Because honestly, I think one of the fundamental things about elections and the challenges we're facing is we actually don't disagree on a lot of issues. I think most people would say, I care about housing and healthcare and a quality education for my kids. But the time of disinformation and just complete cordoning off of different news sources has made us all feel very, very divided. So we already had that challenge with sort of how we consume media and how social media has taken over our lives. And now we're entering this new era of much more challenging disinformation that, you know, it's coming from the highest level, even the president. I mean, the things that he's put online over the last couple weeks, the med beds, you know, it's shocking. Yeah. My office, shortly before I left it, the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, the Future, has a task force right now on AI and what it means for our workforce, for our society, for our privacy. And I would say the advent of AI is sort of bringing this issue of disinformation to a whole nother level, because you can create this sort of fake version of reality. You can make Congressman Raskin into somebody doing something terrible that, you know, that's a fake reality, and people will consume that news. So I do think there is going to be a role, and we are probably already behind in this, and thinking about how do we secure more basic privacy protections for Maine people as they use the internet? How do we ban the use of deep fakes in campaigns, and obviously all the other kind of dangerous things that we can do? But we know that laws probably can only manage so much of this. A lot of it is about educating the public, and especially educating kids. You know, our kids are the ones who are, you know, we're all online way too much. You know, raise your hand if you're not online too much. Yeah, we're all online way too much, and it's, you know, it's challenging our entire society how much we engage with each other. That's part of the problem of where we are. But for our kids, it's really pronounced. I mean, if you see the statistics about youth mental health, youth disconnectedness, even how they're doing in school, a lot of it is about being online. So being online and then being fed disinformation is kind of taking it to a whole nother level. So running for governor, I've already said we have to figure out how to take cell phones out of classrooms. But that's a minor, I mean, that's sort of minor in the scheme of things. We need to think about how do we really help our kids and our young people engage with each other and society and kind of understand this new media environment that we're living in. And I do think that education of the public, especially young people, but all of us, about how the world works, how AI works, how misinformation works. I mean, that's something that's going to have to happen at the highest level, but really in all of our communities as well. So there's no easy answer to this. Maybe Jamie has one, but I think there's a lot that this is sort of, I think, going to be a fundamental challenge of even the next upcoming election. You know, we already see it playing out in the governor's race. So, Jamie.
Well, I mean, I'll give you a little example of something that happened yesterday. I think that was day 2 of the government shutdown that we're in. And so the federal employees who were sent home left messages on their emails saying, you know, we're in a government shutdown. I don't have access to my email, but I'll be in touch when this is over. They were replaced with messages which said, because of the far left and the Democrats in the Senate, we are in a government shutdown. I will be gone until the end of it, but, you know, I will get back in touch then. So, which is an act of, you know, I think it's bureaucratic identity theft, really, because they've imposed a new political identity on those people. But, you know, misinformation and disinformation are the name of the game when it comes to authoritarianism. I mean, that's really what it's all about. I don't know how many of you guys are Navalny fans like me, if you read Navalny's book, Patriot. But he, you know, in the book, you know, he, and it's published posthumously, but he was writing it in prison, and it just blew my mind so much that he went back to Russia voluntarily after everything that had happened, and then ended up in prison and died there. But when he's writing there, he said, we have to do the thing that the tyrants are most afraid of, which is tell the truth. And all of us can tell the truth wherever we are. And we must tell the truth until their lies come crumbling down. And so, you know, we're not going to have a legislative or governmental fix to that, especially with the Republicans in control. They've been taking down any efforts that we had to keep disinformation off of the internet. They've been systematically, basically opening us up to Russian and Chinese disinformation. This has got to be done through popular civil society engagement and uprising against the lies. Everybody's got to take responsibility for telling the truth. And I think Hannah's right that, you know, we saw it in the 2016 election. That's not a matter of debate. I'm not talking about the Russia hoax, okay? This is established fact that Vladimir Putin set up his internet research agency, and 17 American national security agencies all corroborated that they were flooding our internet with lies and memes and propaganda and disinformation. And they did it again in 2020, and it has never stopped. And of course, if you're Vladimir Putin, it makes all the sense in the world. He'll never catch up with America militarily. He'll never catch up with America economically. So his big opportunity is he basically created like a little Marshall Plan for the internet with his internet research agency, figure out how to inject poison and propaganda into our political culture and our political ecosystem, driving everybody apart on grounds of race, religion, ethnicity, political party, destroy the social fabric of the country. You know, and then we end up with January 6, 2021, which was so much a product not just of Donald Trump's incitement to insurrection and inside moves towards a political coup, but also a product of propaganda online, making people believe absolute nonsense. And then our colleagues still swear that Donald Trump won the 2020 election when Joe Biden won by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College, and 60 federal and state courts rejected every claim of electoral corruption and electoral fraud that was brought anywhere in the country. It's just totally certified and established. They still say that Trump won. They still say that the insurrection was caused by Antifa or by the FBI. And I always ask them, gee, well, why is it that Donald Trump just pardoned 1,600 Antifa fighters then? Why did he pardon all those FBI agents? Anyway, but we've got a whole political ecosystem now that thrives on lies and disinformation. And I don't mean to put all the burden on you guys, but it is only people speaking back, fighting back, and contradicting them that's going to turn this around.
Yeah. I wish we had another 5 hours to continue the conversation, but unfortunately, I do think we have to wrap up. And we've been talking a lot of doom and gloom, parade of horribles here. Let's end on a nice, hopeful note. And we'll start with you, Congressman Raskin. What gives you hope for democracy?
Well, Hannah Pingree gives me hope, When I was a kid, my dad used to say to us, when everything looks hopeless, you're the hope. You're the hope. So I'm looking at the hope out here with all these beautiful Maine people and in your amazing state and everything that you've done and everything you guys will continue to do.
Yeah. And Hannah, what about you?
He's given us a lot to think about. And I think we are in a time where as I travel the state, a lot of people are concerned and they want to feel hopeful about the future of Maine. And again, I kind of started out thinking about my community, and I actually think about the 482 communities across Maine. And I will say I feel hopeful because so many people are digging in to do good things in the communities in which they live. They're digging in to stand up for our democracy. I mean, we see that every weekend. We're going to see it on October 18th, my birthday. People are really, it's also the No King's Day protest. People are showing up. But I think I feel hopeful because honestly, people in Maine, I truly believe they do not want to give up on each other. That they are, I think that, again, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, we actually all want the same things. And people are showing up in their communities to figure out how to make good things happen. So I'm hopeful because Maine is a wonderful state filled with wonderful people who care about each other. And I think as long as we hold on to that sort of sense of caring about our neighbors, we can fix these bigger problems. I mean, we have a huge national fight. We have a huge fight against Donald Trump. But I just would urge you, as you engage in that fight, to sort of continue to think about your neighbors, about the challenges that we face right here in the state of Maine, and how we can keep making our lives better for each other. And I think if we keep doing that, Maine we already know it's one of the greatest places in the country to live, and I have so much hope for what the future of Maine can look like, and that makes me enormously hopeful. And again, it is because of all of you and the thousands of people across Maine who spend every day trying to improve the lives of their neighbors. So thank you again, Joanne, for having us here.
Thank you. I just want to take a couple seconds to thank Hannah, thank Congressman Raskin for joining us in this conversation. Thank all of you for coming to this event on this beautiful fall day to listen and to learn. And thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.